Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today is the third in a very special series of episodes with speaker and parenting expert Christina McGhee joining us again. So, Christina, thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, delighted to be here as always.
This is, your series is getting such a phenomenal response from our listeners. And I, that's wonderful because I think what is indicative of, or this is indicative of the fact that, people really want to do the best they can for their kids. And you're such a wonderful resource. You have such great actionable tips for parents. I do want to point out, I see your book in the background. I forgot to grab my copy, but you are the author of Parenting
Oh,
Apart, which is my go-to parenting resource. I recommend it to all of my divorcing couples who have children because it's, I call it the encyclopedia. It's not a read from cover to cover. You can, and it's fantastic information, but it's really the, hey, we have an issue, go and look it up in the table of contents. And then there's a good 5 to 7 pages of solid content of information on what you can do about that particular instance. So everyone, I will have a link to the book as I always do in the show notes. But we're excited today because a few things. One, we got a wonderful response to your first 2 episodes. The first episode was on how to have the talk with your
yeah.
kids. And then the second one is on how to create a parenting plan that works for your kids. And that one got a great response too. Today we're going to talk about, as we tape this, we're going into the the holiday season. We're taping this at the end of October. It will probably air in early November. So going into that holiday season, for many families, it might be their first holiday season as separate households. It's also COVID, which is layering on anxiety and stress. And so we're going to talk about, what parents can do to keep the holidays, we'll say, merry and bright for their kids. But first, we did have a reader question from Fiona. And you very kindly have already given her a very detailed response. But I wanted to, read the question and have you give a couple of tips on Fiona's questions, because I think that,
Sure.
they were sort of the common questions that we heard. So Fiona said, I just listened to the Talking to the Kids About Divorce. It was very insightful. I'm hoping for more actual dialogue, though, to have with my kids. I have a 4 and a 2.5-year-old, so she's got littles. I love how you call them littles. I think that's adorable. My soon to be ex and I have both spoken with them a bit separately about what's going on, but have not yet together. We're also selling the family home and we'll be both living with our parents before we each create our new separate homes. Anything Christina would suggest about what to say and not to say, what should the convo we have with them together looks like? Thanks, Fiona. So, what are a couple of points you'd tell the listeners about Fiona's questions?
Sure. I would say, referring back to the last podcast that we did when we talked about parenting plans, I think the very first, the starting point for every conversation is the parents need to draft a plan, because it's really hard to talk to your kids about what life is going to look like if you haven't mapped it out. So, as best you can, get together and talk about what does moving forward look like for us. So in this particular situation, Fiona and her co-parent could sit down and say, okay, so when's the move taking place? How are we going to transition the kids? What's the time frame? Once you have decided the time frame, then you can think about, so when will we have a conversation? So you really want to map it out in terms of how you're going to move forward. I think when you talk about little kiddos, the hard part is developmentally, the littles don't like fully get it, right? Cognitively,
Yeah.
they're just not there. But I do encourage parents to still, really focus in on the structure and consistency, because what's unique with little ones is that they pick up on the tension, they pick up on the stress, the uncertainty, the chaos of the transition. So you want to, as much as possible, for co-parents to really try to provide some some consistency, predictability, and structure. And if you can mirror that within each home, that's even better. That will help kids tremendously. And then in terms of the talking point, I would refer people back to the guide that I offered as a free bonus for people who listen into the podcast, because I really break down, scripts from young kiddos to older ones. What are some things they need to hear? Basically, with little kids, they need to know that you're always going to be mom and dad. That's not going to change, even though our family's changing. Have a home with mom, a home with dad, and that this is not your fault. Divorce is a grown-up problem. And I do recommend that parents use the word divorce, even though for little kiddos, they don't quite understand it. As you continue to give them the same message over time, they'll be able to integrate it. And it will be just come something that they understand. The other part about the moving and it being temporary in Fiona's situation, which may be an issue for lots of co-parents right now,
Yeah.
with everything that's going on. I think you give kids as much detail as you can that's age appropriate. Think about what's important to them, what things are going to stay the same, what things are going to change, and then tell them that for now, this is where we're going to live. This is going to be the plan. And I tell parents, when you're prepping kids for change, think about other big changes that you have gone through as a family. Like when you take your kids to the first day of school, right? You don't drop them off at the door and go, see you later. You talk with them about it, right? You plan it and you help them visualize it. So when you can do that with your little ones, kind of talk them through, this is where we'll be staying. Here's where your bed's going to be. This is the time you'll have with mom. This is the time you'll have with dad. Mapping it out in that way and giving them real tangible ways to understand those transitions, like the calendars, color-coded calendars, like we talked about.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many little helpful tips. And I do want everyone to know I will have a link again to your giveaway, because it's truly, if you didn't download it yet, folks, please do go get Christina's giveaway, because it has literally scripts of what you can say to your children in all these different situations, and based upon their different ages, as Christina points out here. Fiona's children at 4 and 2.5, you're going to have a different conversation with them than you would with a 14 and 12.5-year-old. So it's just a different, right. It's a different place. But that's a good segue of putting all of that thought and conversation with your co-parents ahead of time into how you're going to handle the schedule or the timing before you talk to your kids, because that also translates into how you're going to handle the holidays. As a family law attorney, I have had so many conversations with families that have quickly accelerated, with couples that have quickly accelerated to very difficult emotional, issues between them when we get to how are the holidays going to be managed between two households. There is hardly a more emotional topic in divorce than this particular topic, and it's very upsetting for people. What I think happens, though, is as upset as the parents get, as you just said, the kids pick up on turmoil, they pick up on those feelings. That if you're going into the holidays with upset and turmoil, that's what the holidays are going to be for your family. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm thrilled that Christina was able to make the time to come and speak to you all about how to manage your holidays, because just because you're having your holidays in two separate households, it doesn't have to be, I think you called it devastating. Different doesn't have to be devastating. And in fact, I've had many families have one. I myself, I have stepchildren. We do different types of holidays with the kids from the time they were 5 when I met them to they were 22, 23 now. Mm-hmm. So, let's dive into that, because one of the things that you did talk about is keeping emotions in check. I just talked about how emotional people get. You say keep emotions in check. How do parents do that?
Well, I think first you've got to raise your level of awareness. You've got to be paying attention to how you're feeling, and most of us don't. We just kind of go with it. We're so focused on external factors that we're not really turning inward, and so if you find yourself really, and usually it's physically that it hits us first,
Oh yeah.
like, the stomach turns in
I was
knots, your
just going to say
throat,
it's the stomach.
tightens up, the shoulders, your jaw clenches. And when you find that you're physically reacting to something, pay attention to that. Check in, as hard as it is, take 5-10 minutes and do it on a lunch break, do it before you go to bed, but just think about, like, what's most important to me about this holiday? Where am I feeling uneasy? Uh, what am I stressed about? Because let's face it, the holidays are stressful, period. Like, even when
Yes.
you're not going through divorce, I don't know a parent alive that isn't like a little tense about this special time that we're having and just everything that goes with it. So try to be thoughtful. And maybe even talk it over with a friend. If you feel like you need to talk about it out loud, find a trusted friend and just say, this is a first holiday and here's what I'm most worried about. I just need to kind of talk through it out loud. And I think that's the starting point.
I think that's,
And
such a good point. If you don't, it's, talking it out with yourself and then talking it out with your co-parent. But try to have that conversation with yourself before you have the conversation with your co-parent about how you're going to manage the holidays. And, the other part, and we talked about this in the parenting plan. In fact, you had a quote in the parenting plan episode that what feels fair to you might not feel fair to your children. And we
right.
have a whole section in that episode about parenting plans and fairness are not necessarily, time with your children isn't something to be divvied up like it's a commodity. You want to look at approaching your parenting time in the way that works best for your kids. Same thing with holidays. It doesn't
Very much
change just
so.
because it's a holiday. So your tip is to forget being fair and to be flexible for your kids.
Absolutely. Remember that it's not about the date on the calendar for kids when you're talking about holidays. Like, I have never come across a kid who has said, on December 25th at 2:05, I really remember this time when we were all together and we baked cookies and I had the best Christmas ever. That's not what kids think about. Kids think about, oh, we baked cookies and it was a great time and I really enjoyed that. Or when we went and built snowmen, or when we watched Christmas movies, all afternoon and ate popcorn together. I mean, there's all kinds of things, but it's really about the experience. So focus on making meaning over the holidays. What kind of memories can you make with your kids? I love that you said, you had a different way of doing the holidays as a bonus family. We did too, because we did like a year on, a year off so that the kids didn't feel conflicted over the holidays by having to drop what they were doing and rush to the other parent's house. So what we would do as a bonus family is that, on our on years, we would celebrate Christmas a certain way. And on our off years, we had New Year's. And so we made New Year's our really big holiday on those years. And the kids had something to look forward to. And now that, our kids are grown, we still do New Year's and we make it a big family gathering and everybody comes together and that's what they remember.
Yes. I mean,
And that's the
I
important part.
that's the significant question. And I have to say, so I have, as I mentioned, my bonus family, my bonus kids. And according to the parenting plan that was worked out, they were supposed to do that alternating holidays with us and with their mom's household. And we did that, I think, for a few years. And then it really became apparent that for the kids, their mom's house was the holiday, that was the house for them to be in. And so we just rearranged the holidays and sort of you did New Year's. We would do a couple of days after Christmas and just have a whole Christmas then. And my husband and I would do something else on Christmas Day. And it's just been that way now and it's the same for Thanksgiving. And, if they're close enough, we just sort of let everybody flow between the households. Now, my kids, my bonus kids are older now, but even when they were younger, what if we were close enough, we really sort of let it be organically what seemed to be working best for them. And that is one of your tips, is to consider the kids, but also not to let them drive the bus on this issue. And so many parents do. I mean, this is I've negotiated parenting plans where it's all about, well, they say they want this, or they say they want that, or they won't go, or so what do you mean by, keeping the kids out of that driver's seat?
Well, I think it puts kids in a really difficult position when you say to them, well, who do you want to spend the holiday with? Where do you want to be? And we kind of guise it as, well, I just want to find out what the kids want. Well, that really puts kids in a no-win situation, because if they say yes to you, they're saying no to the other parent. And as I've mentioned before, I think in other episodes, kids often will really pick up on what they think a parent wants to hear. And so they may say one thing to one parent and another thing to the other parent. And each parent thinks they're the ones that are hearing the truth and that the other parent is lying.
Yes.
So, don't put kids in that kind of situation. I think what you can do is you can talk to kids and say, hey, can you give me some ideas about how you'd like the holiday to look like? I want it to feel most comfortable for you. I don't want you to think about, how it feels for me or how it feels for the other parent, but really, I just like to hear, what about the holidays in the past, or what about the holiday coming up are really important to you? And let's see how we can be creative about honoring that. And really, this is something that I think parents really need to pay attention to, and that is, it's okay to think outside the box. You can be creative about how you approach some of these issues, some of these celebrations. You don't have to throw out everything that you've done in the past. Some of that may be things that you want to keep, traditions you want to hang on to. That's okay. But you can also establish some new ones, and that's
Right.
okay too.
Well, and the traditions, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is what I hear so much. And what makes, I think, trying to visualize for parents, or acclimate to the idea that their children might not be there for a certain date on the calendar, is because there are family traditions around
Mhm.
those times, these holidays. And very often it involves extended family. So, I've always had we always do Thanksgiving at my
Yeah.
parents' house, or Christmas Eve, we always go to church, or the first night of Hanukkah is always done this way. It's what's happened for that family up to that point in time. It's been their tradition. And that's very hard for people to imagine doing something different.
Right.
And so, what tips do you have for those situations where we're not just talking about what you know, the core family, mom, dad, or mom and dad and the children, but what their extended families have always done when
Right.
we're going to
Well,
vary?
I think you need to first take a hard look at what it means for your kids. Okay. So if this is a tradition that's really important for your children, that's where I say, go back to being flexible over fair. Really base that decision around not so much the other parent, but what what's it going to mean to your kids? And if, your kids aren't going to, it's not going to be a deal breaker for them if they're not celebrating Hanukkah in this way, or they're not there for midnight mass, then you may need to, have a conversation with extended family and let them understand that this is kind of part of the way that lives change when you split up, and that we'll be doing the holidays a little different. And you might get some pushback on that. My guess is that's probably not the only thing you're going to get pushback on
Yeah,
over the course of your divorce. So
probably not.
it's a good time to start setting limits. And I think that limits are important regardless, because I think that's part of the stress of the holidays. We're so into trying to meet everybody's demands, all the extended family. What are they going to think? What is Aunt Edna going to think if I don't show up for a Christmas Eve party? Well, maybe this year that's just something you need to mark off your list, because it's creating a lot of tension and stress for the
Right.
family. So do your best to keep the holiday stress free. That's really critical.
Well, and that goes back to that. The holidays aren't just the happiest time of the year. They actually
No.
are stressful time for so many of us. So this does add that extra layer of stress, but some of that is self-created, and
Yeah,
we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And at a time in our lives where so much else is changing, it can feel especially traumatic to give
right.
up those traditions or have to change those traditions. But one of the things that you always stress, and that I think this episode is all about, is it's about the kids. It's about their experience of those holidays. We're the grown-ups.
Right.
And we can get through and deal with the grown-up issues. But for kids, holidays are that magical time for trick or treating, or sitting down and stuffing themselves full of turkey stuffing and mashed potatoes, or opening their present each night during Hanukkah, or whatever those traditions that families
Right.
go through
Right.
might be. I always go back to that scene in Ellen Bruno's film Split, where that one little girl with her sparkling eyes and her big smile said, "So that year we had like 7 Christmases and it was really awesome."
Yeah.
It just goes to, because I, as an attorney, had said that to clients before, with a look of skepticism on their faces, like, kids don't mind having more than one holiday, trust me. But guess what? They don't. You can make it special in a lot of
Right.
different
Right.
ways.
Well, and
Um,
I tell parents, if you're like feeling conflicted, remember this, like what's going to matter most to your kids years from now? Where they spent Christmas Eve, or the fact that their parents are fighting about where they spent Christmas Eve?
yeah, yeah.
Which
Well,
one
go
do you
back
think is
to the
going to have the
conflict
most,
conversation.
which is going to have the most impact? And sometimes looking at it from that perspective can give us the shift we need to really embrace. Because I do think that most parents want to do their very best to make this easier for their kids. It's just we've got so many strong emotions. We get caught up in the moment, and sometimes it's hard to see how the choices we're making are going to impact our kids.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good point. We are already, as we just said, struggling, going through a lot of change, and this is one more impact on us as well, or for the parents, because you and I talked about this. If your children are with the other parent, it does mean that you might be spending the holiday alone, and that
Right.
that adds that additional layer of maybe sadness or loss, or for the parent who doesn't have the children in that moment in time. And that's another reason why making it special when the children are then with you, even if it's not the actual holiday day, can help you as well.
Mm-hmm.
you know so, but we also do just mention one of the big words, and this is, I've literally had pages in agreements over this particular issue: gifts.
Ooh.
So some of these holidays are geared around gifts.
Yeah.
Specifically, mostly it's Hanukkah, Christmas, the kids' birthdays, things like that. But this can be so rife with issues. I mean, one parent outspending the other, having more ability to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Where the gifts are going to be and where they stay. Do the toys go back and forth between the households? Your tip is to give gifts without strings, which I love the concept. How does that happen?
Yeah. So I tell parents to really be very thoughtful about how attached they are to a gift they're giving. So if you're giving a gift to a child and it's their gift, then the child should get the opportunity to decide where the gift lives, or if they want to take it back and forth. It's their gift. If you're really struggling with that, then I would say you're better off not giving it as a gift. Now, it's perfectly okay when you have two households to say, hey, here's this bicycle I'm buying you so that when you're here at this house, you have a bike to ride and you can go and hang out with your friends and you can do stuff. That is creating a home. It's a very different thing to say, hey, here's your bike, it's your Christmas present, and it can never go over to the other household. So they're sending very two different messages. And it's really important for parents to think about how that feels for kids. Here's a gift, but
Yeah, but it can only live here.
right, it's not
Yeah.
crossing the line. It's not crossing the line. And so it's important for parents to really be thoughtful about that, to think through how that feels for kids. And if you're just, if you're not sure, then you're better off not giving it. The other piece is, also don't set the other parent up, and be mindful about what you're giving kids. So, it's not okay to give your kids a new puppy and say, hey, you can take it over to the other house. So,
this little poop machine is going to go over to my co-parent's house. Yeah.
I'm sure your dad or mom will love it. So I think that the best case scenario is for parents to have conversations about gifts, right? You can give joint gifts, or, just have a conversation so you're not duplicating gifts. Because that also, creates an issue for kids when they get the same gift at each household. Like,
it's a little underwhelming when they open the second one.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, and we also, you don't think about what kind of values do you want to give your kids? Because the other thing is, a lot of parents will overextend themselves. They'll just give and give and give. Where's the specialness in that?
Right. Well, I think there's that desire to make it a special holiday. And so parents will overspend or perhaps extend themselves in a way that they might not have in the intact households, and go beyond their means. But it also sets up almost a competitive feel for parents. And
Yeah.
I've actually had parents, and this is something that maybe people can discuss with their co-parent. I've had couples that will create a combined pot of holiday spending money, and they will each shop out of that combined and give combined gifts. And
Nice.
They will have, from mom and dad, or mom and dad, and they will have some of those gifts be at one household and some of those gifts be at the other household. But they will decide, we're going to spend a certain amount. We'll each put in this much toward it. And, many families have one parent that's traditionally done the Christmas shopping. Sometimes that it works for those families for that person to continue doing that. Sometimes they talk and they split it up. And that's actually worked very well for some of my families, because then that takes all of that, everything that we've just talked about, out of the mix. It's a jointly given gift. It can go between the two households.
Right.
There's no double gifting, and there's no competitiveness in the gifting. So something to consider. But there's also for kids, I think, because many families don't sit down. Many parents have a hard time talking about this. This is extremely emotional. Parents don't like talking about it. It's very, difficult. And so they may not either have a plan, or they have a hard time talking to their kids about it. So sometimes the kids are kind of left in the dark.
Right.
That's a big problem.
That's a huge problem. It's really difficult for kids to manage a situation when they don't know what to expect. Right. And so if we want the holiday to be stress-free, part of that means understanding that kids navigate a lot of situations behind the scenes that we are not even aware of as parents. Just very simple things like, Brittany's having a Christmas play, and she may be really angsting over, like, my parents aren't sitting together this year. So, where do I look? And who do I go to first after the Christmas play is over? If I go to dad, is mom going to get upset? If I go to mom, is his feelings going to get hurt? How do I handle that? A lot of times we're not thinking about that as parents. So I think wherever you can kind of get ahead of it, and really think about your kids, where can you minimize some of those unnecessary stressors by thinking ahead? If you have a parent who's not particularly cooperative, and for example, with the Christmas play, that might be an issue for Brittany, you can say to Brittany, I know dad's going to be there. So when you get done, why don't you go over and say hello to him first? And I'll be waiting for you, by the backstage door. So you go ahead and make a plan, and you just take that stress away from them so they don't have to worry about it. I also think with the holidays, like, what's it going to look like? Where am I going to be when? Kids are wondering these kind of things. And when we're not talking about them, that creates more anxiety. So really mapping it out and just saying, so this year, here's how we're going to approach the holidays, and letting them know. And especially with little ones, again, back to the color coded calendar so that they can actually see where they're going to be when. And I would also say the same is true for older kids. You might not color code it, but maybe you put it on a Google Calendar or you
Yeah.
text it to them. But just so they're real clear, because they're not only navigating between parents, but also their friends, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, they've got a lot of other things going on. So
Yeah.
you really want to just talk with the kids.
You just said that about the Christmas play at school, and it reminds me, I was talking to a colleague the other day. Now we're talking about a family mediator who's probably in his later 30s, and we were talking about his growing up in a divorced family, and he told me, so this is 20 years later for him, he told me the story of the school play. I don't know if it was a holiday play, but the school play, and his parents were both there. And he still remembers very viscerally as he came off the stage, not knowing where to go. Like,
Yeah.
do I go to mom? Do I go to dad? So if you don't think that impacts your children, this is a divorce professional who, he choked up. He got teary when we were talking about it. And it made me feel so badly for him and wonder. So I so love that tip, that the parent can alleviate that so easily by saying, I know dad's going to be there. I know mom's going to be there. Go ahead and say hi to them. And then I'll just be waiting for you, afterwards. I'm so proud of you. Have a wonderful play, break a leg or whatever.
Yeah.
I just love it. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a big drama or trauma, but you just took that off your kid's plate of stress. I just love that. It's
You know,
wonderful.
so one of the things that I wanted to just add um, into the conversation when we're talking about unnecessary stressors is that, for adult children of divorce, the holidays can really, really be challenging and stressful. And a lot of times parents don't think about the impact their choices or how they're handling the holiday is going to affect their kids. So because there's no order in place telling us how to handle the holidays, a lot of times parents will have expectations. Well, of course, you're coming to see me for Christmas or Hanukkah. And the other parent may have the same expectation. And I've talked with adult children of divorce, and it really is such a challenge for them because they feel very conflicted, saying yes to one parent and saying no to the other. And they worry about letting someone down. And so they're scrambling to try to divide their time to be fair. Fair, there's that F word again, to everybody. And
Yes.
so I think that as parents, it's important to take into consideration how your expectations affect your adult children. And, instead of insisting that everybody is sitting at the table on Thanksgiving Day, maybe you need to shift your holiday and have an alternate, Thanksgiving celebration. Or, again, be creative about how you spend the holidays together and make it more about making a memory with your kids than what the actual date is on the calendar. And I can tell you that kids have such a high level of appreciation for a parent that is willing to be flexible and, take away that unnecessary stress for them.
And talk to them about it. I mean, I think that's the key component, because even
Yeah.
what you just said about adult children is, instead of just assuming, well, they're grown-ups now, there are no orders in place, it's okay, they can just figure it out themselves. Understanding that there may still be stress there for them, and just saying to them, we've always done our Thanksgiving on Friday. That's perfectly fine to continue doing that if that works for you still. Or, we'll be fine, stay in one, do what we've done up to now, that sort of thing. But talk to them about it.
Right.
We truly in our lives avoid the difficult conversations, or what we perceive to be difficult. And that only makes everything more difficult. So if there's one big lesson out of all of this, is you need to talk to your co-parent about it if you can. You need to talk to your kids about the holidays. And you need to talk, as we just started the episode, you need to talk to yourself and
Yeah.
understand, your stressors, and recognize that. So one thing I want to mention to listeners is, I do have right after this an episode coming up with Dr. Elizabeth again, the divorce doctor. And we're going to talk about how you can address your feelings of stress and perhaps loneliness or other issues that are coming up for you during the holidays, especially if you're going through divorce, and especially as it's compounded right now by COVID and all of the
Right.
complications that raises. So beyond your children and the holidays, Dr. Elizabeth and I will be talking about you and your mental health and the holidays. So tune in next week for that episode. But Christina, again, it's always so wonderful to have you on. We're going to have you back again next month. But thank you, because this holiday episode is something that I know is going to be a lifeline for so many families. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much, Susan. Again, I so grateful for the opportunity to share information. And I just want to mention that that we had talked about at the top of, I guess before we got on, that there are some articles that you're going to post links to. So if people
Yes.
are looking and they want like a deeper dive into information, I've written about the holidays on several occasions. And so go check out those articles. Chances are that the question you have may just be there. And if it's not, feel free to pitch it Susan's way.
Yes, actually send to divorceandbeyondpod@gmail.com, and Christina might answer your question live on another episode. And just remind people, Christina, how they can reach out to you and find out more about you and get your book.
Sure. So the name of my book is Parenting Apart: How Separated and Divorced Parents Can Raise Happy and Secure Kids. You can get it at any major retailer for books. And you can find me at divorceandandchildren.com. I'm also on Facebook, Divorce and Children. And if you want to start a conversation or are looking for some support or other parents to connect with, please, drop on by and check us out.
So we'll see you again soon, Christina. And to all of you, have a happy holiday season. It's going to be fine. And just, take it slowly, be kind to yourself, be kind to your kids,
Absolutely.
and have a wonderful holiday season. So thank you, Christina.
My pleasure.